I was 10 when the Monroe Youth Development Center closed its gates and handed each of us a windbreaker that smelled like bleach and lemon candy. I remember the way the chain-link fence shivered in the wind, the cracked basketball court painted with a free throw line that didn't line up with a hoop, the intercom melodies threaded between periods like a lullaby someone sped up by mistake. We were told the music would help us focus. Mostly, it made my jaw ache. They loaded us onto yellow buses, and the building behind us sank into the dust like a ship going down in slow motion. The grown-ups spoke the words we were supposed to repeat. Restructuring, budget decisions, better opportunities, but we knew the center wasn't closing because it failed. It was closing because it had finished. I left Wyoming at 18 and promised I wouldn't come back for anything short of a funeral. When my mother called with the first one, I went silent long enough that she said, "Jonah, you still there?" I was. I just didn't have a word. The boy was someone I used to trade baseball cards with, the kind who always took too long picking. He shot his aunt and then drove smiling into a dry ravine. The second was a girl who once beat me at horse and told me she liked the way the gym lights hummed. She put her head through a plate glass window because, she said, the light had gotten too loud. I tried to keep telling myself what the anchors on the local news told everyone: a bad season, a cluster, one of those cruel coincidences small towns don't have the resources to understand. Then the list of names started to rhyme with my own life, and the coincidence turned into a door I couldn't stop opening. I returned in late September, when the sun does that tired shine that makes everything look older. The highway unspooled into a town of sunburned storefronts, angled parking, and a mural on the feed store wall where the paint had blistered into scales. My mother's house hadn't changed except for the new smoke detector in the hallway and the cardboard box of clippings she'd saved for me. She kept the box on the kitchen table like a centerpiece. "I thought you'd want to see," she said. The articles were neatly clipped and flattened with a glass jar of peach pits, headlines about accidents, about violence that seemed to roll downhill all at once, about memorial services that felt like copy-paste jobs. I read until the words stopped meaning much, and my eyes kept finding the same phrases. Sudden, inexplicable, no warning. The sheriff met me outside Hank's diner, where the door still stuck if you didn't pull up while you pulled out. He'd been a straight-backed man when I was small, the kind who handed me a sticker at the county fair and made my mother feel safe. Now he carried his shoulders like they belonged to someone taller. "You keep your head down, Jonah," he said. "The center's cursed ground." He said it like a joke that forgot to smile. I walked to the Monroe facility that afternoon because I couldn't not go. The road out there is the kind that looks flat until you're on it. Then it rolls under you like a sleeping animal. The sign for the center had been taken down. Only the two steel posts remained, gone dull with time, standing as a pair like teeth waiting for a bite. The chain-link fence was still up. Someone had repaired the gaps with zip ties, pulled tight until the plastic had whitened and cracked in the sun, little stitched X's every few yards. Native grass had pushed up in bristly waves through the parking lot, catching bottle caps and chip bags and the shredded blue tail of a grocery sack. The guardhouse door was open. So was the drawer of the little desk inside. If I stood just right, I could smell the building through the warm dust, a mix of floor wax and dry mop and the particular paper smell of worksheet stacks. That scent lives inside my head as a hallway, right turn for math, left for reading, lunch when the song ends. It took both hands to set my heart back to a normal pace. When it decided to cooperate, I went in. The guardhouse held a cracked mug, a laminate card with a list of emergency codes. Severe weather, 2 long tones, shelter in place, 1 long, 1 short, and a plastic bin where the stapler and pencils should have gone. The bin was full of cassette tapes. Each tape had a printed label with a date and a clean serifed word. Focus, comply, sleep, remember. The dates overlapped my years at Monroe like shingles. Beneath the tapes lay a folder that stuck to the bottom of the bin as if it had lived there a long time. Monroe, sub-odd cognitive, the tab read. I said the letters out loud in the guardhouse just to hear a voice. The folder felt wrong in my hands, too heavy for what it was. Inside, typed pages with tidy diagrams of bell schedules and tone frequencies, homework templates with pale gray phrases ghosted behind equations, directives stamped in the margins in red, reinforce, rehearse, reward. There were memos about pro-social conditioning and automaticity and community compliance vectors, the kind of words that dress up as concern to hide what they're doing. On a sheet clipped to the back was a list of subject groupings: Group A, Group B, Group C, letters next to classroom numbers, and names in a neat tallied column. I let my eyes skate over them because I knew exactly what I would find. When I reached the W's, I stopped. Jonah W., Group C. The line hummed in my ears like a bug. My jaw ached suddenly, a child's ache, back molars pressed until the nerves throbbed. That was the first sign in those days that the music was about to change, that we'd be told with a melody to stop or sit or go. Standing in the guardhouse with both elbows on the desk to keep from shaking, I was 10 again, waiting for a bell to tell my feet what to do. The wind pushed a bottle cap along the parking lot, and it clicked against the concrete in a rhythm I recognized without wanting to. For a moment, I had the absurd thought that if I held perfectly still, the building would blink and I'd be back where I started, my number on a clipboard, my name pronounced by a secretary who didn't look up. On the last page of the folder, someone had written in hard pencil, "If you can read this, it's still working." I laughed, the kind of laugh that makes your throat feel scraped. The guardhouse had no chair, so I leaned against the door frame and looked back toward the highway. Traffic came in pairs, a rancher's truck followed by nothing, a minivan carrying stickers, and then nothing. There's a particular silence out there that is not empty. It's crowded with the things you've taught yourself not to hear. I felt the press of that silence and turned back to the bin of tapes because the alternative was to stand in it and let it press until I cracked. I stacked the cassettes carefully, not because they were fragile, but because I had the sense that anything less would be rude. The labels were the same font for 3 years. Then the words changed. Comply disappeared, and something close to it took its place. Communicate. The dates rolled forward. Sleep kept its name. Remember doubled in frequency the year the center closed. Someone had crossed out a label and written, "Listen," in blue pen. The pen had leaked through the paper sleeve. I wiped my thumb on my jeans, though I hadn't touched the ink. The sun slid a degree lower, the shadow of the fence stretching across the parking lot in a ladder that didn't match any step. I didn't want to be there when the light failed. I put the folder back together as well as I could. The clip was bent and snapped twice before it bit down. The tapes went into the bin into my arms. They were heavier then, or my arms were weaker. Either way, I carried them to the truck like you carry a sleeping child. Balanced, careful, aware that dropping them would break something in you no one could fix. On the way back through town, I slowed near the places that had always carried sound. The church with its bell that rang 3 notes and a sigh, Hank's tires, where the old radio jingle used to lodge in your head until you found yourself humming in the checkout line. The elementary school, shuttered now, whose floodlight buzz made the winter snow look like television static. I didn't park. I didn't get out. I let the truck idle and watched people move in the soft late light. Someone sweeping a stoop, a boy riding a bike with a seat too low, my mother's neighbor carrying in a flat of bottled water. A song I didn't mean to think about started its first bar somewhere behind my teeth. I bit down gently, and it fled. When I pulled into my mother's driveway, she was waiting on the porch with her cardigan pulled tight and that look she gets when she wants to say, "I told you so," but is afraid it will change the weather. "You didn't go out there," she said, which wasn't a question. I set the bin on the kitchen table beside the clippings box, like a second darker centerpiece. "Just a minute," I said. "I need to wash my hands." In the bathroom, I turned the water on too hot and held my wrists under it until I could feel only one thing. The mirror gave back a face that looked both like mine and like the boy who had learned to move when the bell rang. I don't know how long I stood there, letting the heat pull the ache out of my jaw. When I shut off the tap, the sudden quiet had weight. I dried my hands on the towel my mother won at the county fair for a pie she still bakes by memory, and walked back to the kitchen as if I hadn't left. We ate in the kind of silence that is not empty either. She passed me the peas. I passed her the salt. The box waited on the table between us, rectangular and patient. When she asked what I'd found, I said, "Paperwork." When she asked if it helped, I said, "It explained some things." Both of those were true. Neither of them touched what mattered. After dinner, I carried the bin to my old room, set it on the desk where I'd learned to add fractions, and told myself I would sleep. I lay down. My body remembered what it was to wait for a tone that permitted rest. I didn't sleep. I counted breaths. Somewhere in the house, the new smoke detector gave a little test chirp, a single high note with a clean tail. I flinched. Before midnight, I got up and set the bin on the floor by the door so I wouldn't forget to take it with me in the morning. I told myself there would be time to go through it properly, to match dates to bells, labels to memories, songs to incidents. I told myself this was just a box of dead things. The last thought I had before sleep took me, quick as a switch, was the pencil sentence on the final page and the absurd, awful laugh I had let out when I read it. If you can read this, it's still working. My mother left for the early service, the way she always had, with her Bible in a quilted sleeve and a kiss that still smelled faintly of ponds. I waited until her car crested the end of the block before I carried the bin from my room to the kitchen table and spread the contents like a patient on an operating sheet. The cassette player from the pantry needed new batteries. I found a blister pack beside a jar of peach pits and worked the metal contacts until a red light came on. I told myself I would begin with "remember" because it sounded gentle. My hand chose "focus." The tape clicked into place with a mechanical sigh. The opening tone was pure and soft-edged, The kind of sound you hear in a dentist's office when nobody speaks for too long. Under it, a music box melody. I felt my molars touch. Then the voice, male, patient, precise, reciting single words at a steady pace. Window, cotton, sand, obey, dust, obey. My chest tightened in the old way, the inspection day way, arms straight, chin down. I took the headphones off and set them on the table and said a curse word just to hear something messy in the air. The typed pages explained more than I wanted them to. Subliminal embeds in the intercom songs. Bell tones hiding conditioned intervals. Flash frames grafted into the Saturday morning cartoons recorded for quiet time. Worksheets printed with phrases in a gray so faint you could only see them by squinting or by letting your eyes relax until the letters bloomed. Be neat, be still, wait your turn. Memos used words that wore good intentions like masks, pro-social reflex conditioning, automaticity, civic habit, and then diagrams that didn't bother to hide. Bars of tones labeled with commands, calendar grids with target weeks for reinforcement, reward schedules that aligned suspiciously well with the days the cafeteria served pudding. The group and list was a single sheet, clipped at the back, a through D, columns of names matched to homerooms and routes. I had prepared for the possibility and still felt the vertigo of seeing myself in print, the way your name can knock you sideways if you aren't braced. Jonah W., Group C. The ache in my jaw sharpened, as if the act of reading had plucked an invisible string behind my ears. I found the old tire shop jingle in the appendix almost immediately, a notation that Group C responded well to local auditory cues, the four-note motif transcribed like a nursery rhyme. Someone had written "roll safe" in the margin and underlined it twice. Comply appeared on the labels for 2 years and then vanished, replaced by communicate in the same clean font. Sleep never changed. Remember doubled its frequency the year the center closed. I recognized phrases in the scripts printed for the voice on the tapes. You did well following directions had become you are a helper, the same shape in a nicer dress. In a later memo, a line I read twice to be sure. Language updated per consultant guidance. Structure retained. I played communicate, because I couldn't not. The man's voice became a woman's, then a child's laugh braided in and out, never quite a word, always an approval. The tone structures were the same. The colored paper changed. Every so often, the melody took a small dip, a little sigh, the kind you only notice if you're waiting for it. I wasn't aware I'd started to count that sigh until I reached 4 and realized my breath had hitched to match it. The map fell out of a later folder when I lifted it wrong, a simple print of the region with red dots stabbed in like push pins. Not just our county, dots along the interstate, clustered around box store strips and chain diners in Colorado, Utah, Nebraska. A yellow sticky note glued to the margin read, pilot scaled. Check SD/ND/KS. Someone else had scrawled underneath. We're not the only site. I put my thumb on our town out of reflex and then pulled it back as if the paper had heated under my skin. I needed something that wasn't paper. I drove to Hank's Tires because I told myself it would be a way to prove the past was gone. The sign still leaned, "We'll keep you rolling." The same dead tractors ringed the lot like a half-truth. The Pump Island speakers worked. A cheery voice promised lifetime alignment and a coffee you wouldn't hate. Then the jingle, 4 notes exactly as transcribed, followed by that soft, descending tone. My hands tightened on the wheel. There are movements the body makes that feel like decisions. I put the truck in park and walked in a straight line toward the glass door. The bell over it chimed a bright arpeggio and tucked a sigh at the end like a tail. I stopped just past the threshold. The counter kid looked up from his phone. "Can I help you?" he asked. I reached for my wallet and came up with nothing because I hadn't come for tires. Had my mouth told the truth without asking me first? "Sorry," I said, and turned. The bell sang behind me when the door shut. 1, 2, 3, and I counted the fourth beat with my teeth clenched. A child's trick to keep the sound from getting inside. It got inside anyway. Back at the house, I played tapes until the late morning sun slanted onto the table and warmed the plastic. Sleep was worse than I remembered because it worked. 3 minutes in, and I felt my knees want to fold. Listen, someone had crossed out the old title and replaced it in ballpoint, was breathy and kind. It told me I was part of something larger in a register that made my vision soften. A later communicate came with a script about being prepared, about keeping loved ones safe, and when the tape clicked off, I realized I'd retrieved the flashlight from under the sink and set it neatly on the counter during the second track. The news at noon was all weather and football until it wasn't. A supermarket parking lot 2 states over filled the screen, asphalt bright as a skillet, a red blur ricocheting between cars. The anchor, used sudden and inexplicable. Someone had recorded the door of the market opening a dozen times in the clip, and even through the bad phone audio, the bell chimed with a little human sigh. It was small and deniable, the kind of sound that could be anything at all. I stood up too fast, found the sink by touch, and was sick until there was nothing left to give. When I straightened, a melody was already forming behind my tongue. I yanked the kitchen timer plug from the wall and held the cord like a snake until my hand stopped shaking. I went back to the papers because paper doesn't look at you. The memos after the last school year spoke in a clipped, confident voice that implied meetings and funding, regional partners engaged, messaging harmonization, deployment into established infrastructure. A notation I didn't want to understand, AM/P SA schedule, shared with county. Another, which I couldn't pretend not to understand, door chime vendors briefed. Under that, check marks beside 3 suppliers I recognized from our town's hardware store invoices. At some point, my mother came home and stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold like the kitchen had become a crime scene. "Jonah," she said. I kept my finger on a line of type like I was saving my place in a prayer book. "It wasn't just us," I said. "It didn't stop." She folded her arms and leaned her shoulder against the frame the way she did when I was a boy and had slammed a door. "Eat something," she said. "Then you can call whoever you think will listen." We ate before we spoke more because eating is something you can do when speech fails. After dinner, I returned to the map and traced the interstate runs with a pencil, looking for a pattern that would feel like a plan. The red dots weren't random. They hugged places where sound is an obligation: schools, churches, stores with security chimes, radio stations with grant-funded public service announcements. In the last file, paper clipped almost as an afterthought. A form letter to sheriff's departments explained the updated emergency tone sequence being adopted across several counties, praised interagency cooperation, and recommended twice daily testing during the pilot period to foster community familiarity and reduce anxiety. The sequence printed at the bottom ended with a small arrow pointing down. A sigh. I thought of the sheriff outside Hank's diner, shoulders notched, the way he said cursed like he wanted to make me laugh. I thought of the names in the shoebox and the way the bright clip on the noon news cut off just before the sound I knew would be there. I looked at the bin of tapes and the folder with my name in it and felt something click that was not mechanical. "I'm going to him," I said to my mother, first thing. She didn't ask who. She didn't ask why. She put her hand over mine the way she did when I was little and wouldn't hold still for a haircut. "Go in the morning," she said. "Sleep first." I took the bin back to my old room and set it on the desk and made myself write down what I would bring so I couldn't change my mind in the night. 2 tapes, the grouping list, the memo about door chimes, the map with the sticky note. I placed them under my truck keys. I set an alarm on my phone and then, ashamed of how quickly my body reacted to the little chime, turned the volume to 0 and moved the phone face down under a shirt. I lay on the bed and listened to the house breathe. Sometime after midnight, the new smoke detector gave a polite test chirp, and I flinched anyway. When sleep came, it arrived in a clean drop, like a switch slipping to off. At 6:30, I woke with my jaw already tight. I showered, dressed, and ate toast I didn't taste while my mother stood at the sink and watched the day decide itself beyond the window. At 7:40, I put the chosen tapes and papers into the bin and carried it to the truck. The morning air had that brittle edge late September saves for the faithful. I told my mother I'd be back after I'd just shown someone something. She nodded, like that sentence was a thing a person could say and mean. The AM station came on by habit when I started the engine, a piano bed under a woman's even voice. "We're safer together," she said. My thumb found the power button without being told. The station blinked to silence, but the rhythm of the words she'd used jogged something in the back of my mouth anyway. I drove to the station with the bin seat belted beside me, a to-go coffee cooling untouched in the cup holder, and the morning sunlight casting fence shadow ladders across the road just long enough to step through them if you believed in that kind of thing. I parked in front of the sheriff's office at 7:58 with 2 minutes to spare and the feeling of being exactly on time for a bell I couldn't hear yet. At 7:58, I parked in front of the sheriff's office with the bin seat-belted beside me and the coffee gone cold. The sun had not cleared the courthouse roof yet. The flag hung as if listening. When I killed the engine, the AM station cut off mid-sentence and left a picture frame of silence around the lobby door. The glass had a new decal about emergency readiness. The bell above it was the bright brass kind that tries to sound friendly. Inside, scuffed linoleum, a rack of pamphlets about safe burn seasons and flood zones, a bulletin board with a missing cat that had been missing so long the paper had gone the color of tea. The receptionist wore a cardigan with pilled elbows and a lanyard printed with strawberries. Her radio sat on the counter tuned by habit or instruction to the local AM. A soft piano bed. Then a woman's even voice. "In an emergency, we stay calm, we slow down, we help each other, we are safer together." It was all wrong and almost perfect. The 4 notes wanted to be the tire jingle, but weren't. They were cleaner, as if someone had scrubbed them and left a lemon smell behind. The ending carried a breath of a descending tone, a sigh, almost polite. I set the bin on the counter, meaning to hold on, and watched my hand open neatly at the wrist. The receptionist slid a sign-in sheet forward. Her pen had a tiny felt paw stuck to the cap to make it cute. "Morning," she said, the way you say it when the word has more work to do later. I wrote Jonahw in a hand I didn't like. You can distrust yourself and still move. "Sheriff's just coming in," she added. She turned the radio up a fraction without looking. The piano warmed. The sigh at the end of the sentence landed in my chest with the familiar soft click that turns thought into motion. Somewhere, far away, a boy lined up at a classroom door and folded his hands because he was good. I said it out loud to catch my own mouth before it could shape anything else. "I choose?" My voice parted the air like a finger through icing. The receptionist looked at me and then away, as if I had coughed. The bell over the inner door chimed an arpeggio that tucked a tail on its end, and my breath hitched to count 4. I bought one more second by picking up the pen cap and sticking the felt paw back on. It is harder to be led when your hands are already busy. The sheriff came through the inner door with the stoop I remembered from the diner. He said my name the way people say it when they're rehearsing kindness. "Jonah." "We need to talk," I said, and heard how practiced I sounded. "We'll take it from here," he said, already soothing. He reached across the counter and put his palm on the folder with the grouping list, not to hide it, but to remove the problem from me. Touch was always part of it. Gentle, steady, the way a teacher steadies a desk when he thinks a child will rock it. "This isn't paperwork," I said. "This is a lever." My mouth was going faster than I wanted. If I stopped moving, the gloves would find my hands. He glanced at the radio, and the radio obliged by landing its last 4 notes exactly as the bell shimmer from the inner door faded. You could miss it if this town hadn't taught you how to hear. Call and response, question and consent. I felt the old glove slide down over my bones, my body prepared to be agreeable. I reminded myself to be inconvenient. "Just listen," I said. The word flipped a switch of its own. Listen on a label, listen as an instruction that wasn't one. I dragged the bin closer to me and flipped open the folder to the memo about door chime vendors, the AM PSA schedule, the check marks that matched the hardware store invoices. It didn't stop. They scaled it. They put the tone in the places we're required to hear. Bells, radios, phones. It's everywhere you think you're safe already. His eyes softened, and I hated that reaction because it was the correct one if I was sick and the wrong one if I was not. The receptionist's radio drifted into a 30-second slot about smoke alarms. "Test monthly," the woman said, her voice a hand at the small of your back. "Replace batteries yearly." The last note carried that breath again. I had the disorienting sensation that the room leaned. I locked my knees like a kid at assembly. "I called Cheyenne," the sheriff said, still gentle. "They told me we've got new protocols, better tones for emergencies, standardized messages. They've done a lot of work on the psychology, so folks won't panic." "So folks will do what they're told," I said. I pictured the supermarket clip cut off before the bell, and for a second, the world slid 2 inches sideways. I could see 2 true things at once. How a town that lived through fires and floods would want a tone that made people efficient, and how useful that tone would be if you ever wanted to shape the space between wanting and doing. The clock on the wall rolled to 8 o'clock, and a chime sounded from the speaker in the ceiling I hadn't noticed. Not the AM, the building itself. 3 notes and a down arrow. My jaw tightened so hard I felt a pop. The sheriff's hand settled over the folder, the soother's hand, the steadying weight. I could feel the next second forming like a word. "I choose," I said again, the trick I'd learned from the tape's monotonous man. A pre-word to tangle the tongue when the command came. "I choose, I cho." The entry glass woofed. A mother with a stroller shouldered the door, half her attention on the toddler's sippy cup, half on whatever the day was already demanding. The bell over it chimed the bright arpeggio with a little polite sigh that matched the ceilings. It landed in me like a key, finding a lock it had been filing against for years. My mouth was already forming the first syllable of the tire shop slogan. The sheriff's palm pressed down a hair heavier, not pinning, just confirming. The receptionist reached to lower the radio, because that is what you do when people are talking. Her cardigan sleeve slid back just enough for me to see the small white scar on her wrist. I had never seen it, but my eye found it, because scars and exit signs are what the body records first. The woman with the stroller smiled at the desk, because that is what you do when you enter a public room. The bell's tail note sighed. Something enormous and unbearably simple closed its jaw around the moment, and all the careful seconds I had purchased with tricks and phrases fell through the floor. I didn't hurt anyone in the sheriff's office. If you're looking for blood here, you won't find it. What I did was what I had been taught to do when a sequence completed. I complied. I surrendered the folder. I nodded. I said the words that made this easier for the men who believed they were helping. I signed the check-in sheet again because the sheriff said I had missed a line. I left the bin. I left the room. I walked into daylight with nothing in my hands and everything pressed so neatly into me that I didn't feel the weight at first. Outside, the morning had warmed into something ordinary. Sprinklers clicked against yellow grass. A truck idled with its turn signal, ticking a metronome against the bright. I went to my own truck and sat. I did not cry. I did not pound the steering wheel. I drove because the light changed and the car behind me asked me to. I ended up in Hank's Tire's parking lot because there is a logic to circles. The signal is strongest there. Some overlap of AM and whatever the county installed. Some confluence of tones polished by years of use. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat and connected to the shop's guest Wi-Fi. The password was still roll true, the way it had been when I was a kid, stealing signal to watch baseball highlights. The radio on the pump island burbled its afternoon lineup 2 hours early because someone scheduled the syndicated feed wrong again. I took it as a mercy, or a rehearsal. I typed, because the body can only contain so much. I wrote down the steps like an instruction card for an emergency I had already entered. How the voices changed wording and not structure. How the labels on the tapes softened without altering the intervals. How the door chimes mirror the building. Chimes mirror the AM sigh at the end of a sentence. I wrote about the sheriff's hand. How gentle is a command when you've been taught to meet gentleness with yes. I wrote down the trick the tapes taught me, to say I choose before the tone, because maybe it will give someone a breath. A breath can be a life. Sometimes it is only a breath. The thing about conditioning is that it does not erase you. It builds a habit a half second ahead of you and waits for you to step into it. A glove laid open on a table. If you are tired enough, or good enough, or scared enough, you put your hand in. I am not absolving myself. I am explaining the shape of the room. Every hour on the hour, the AM runs the public service announcement about preparedness. At the half hour, the county tests the new emergency tone. Here, in this lot, between the pump speakers and the shop door, both arrive with kindness in their timing. I can hear them even when the radio is off. That is not metaphor. Some sounds leave dents in you. At 25, a man came out of the shop with a box of wiper blades and a smile he didn't feel. The bell over the door chimed. The box threatened his grip, and he bobbled it and laughed the way you do to tell other people you aren't dropping something dangerous. The bell's little sigh nested in the larger silence like a bird. I practiced the trick out loud, a talisman, against the next 5 minutes. I choose, I said low. I choose, I choose, I choose. It helps to give your mouth work, so the other words have to wait in the hall. It does not undo the hall. At 29, the AM jingle for the tire rotation special queued up. A 4-note lead-in so familiar, my tongue positioned itself without asking. The emergency test tone will come at 30 with 3 notes and a sigh. The way they align here is precise, a dovetail joint. Someone will tell me later that is coincidence. Someone always will. I close the laptop halfway and leave this open anyway, because shutting it will make the screen dark. At the same instant, the tone arrives, and that feels like opening a door in a blackout. A woman 2 spots down buckles her child into a car seat. The child's sneakers blink with each kick, the way mine once did in a gym where the lights hummed. The pump island speaker clears its throat. In the shop, someone laughs. The bell marks the moment. My jaw aches. I can tell you without looking that my hands are opening as they were trained to do when kindly told. This is not sudden. It is not inexplicable. It is the most logical thing in the world. A sequence concludes and the body moves to complete it. You can tell a story about monsters if you want. Mine is about a melody. At 30 seconds, the emergency tone arrives. 3 notes and the little downward breath that means we will now behave. The AM's last piano figure lays over it like a blessing. I say the words as fast as I can to put ice in the gears. I choose, I choose, I choose. The glove finds my hand anyway. I stand because the sequence says stand. I smile because I have been told to help. It is not the sheriff's hand on mine now. It is mine, on a door or a shoulder or a body, between a cart and a bumper. I will move fast and clean and in time, because that is what I was built to do in rooms with bells. If there is mercy in this, it is that I know it as it happens. If there is a reason to have written any of this, it is that you might count the notes when the hour turns and decide to be inconvenient for 1 more second. The bell in my head chimed long before the real one did. The world goes narrow the way a hallway does when the class is changing. I go where the tone points me. I am a helper. I am pro-social. I am exactly on time. I choose